Hello, Global Theater. My name is Jerry Fielka. Today is November 28, 2021. We want to thank the hidden ground of this podcast, Rob Grant. Thanks for having us, Rob, and hosting us.
My pleasure.
Now
Have
go
fun.
write some great comedy. Anyways, Nicholas Swanton. Is that the correct way to pronounce it?
Yeah, yes, it is.
It's an honor and a pleasure. Nicholas, what's the best thing for a human being?
I think the best thing for a human being is the liberty to find what best facilitates one's self to function most freely.
Wow, there's a lot of depth to that. There's like 3 or 4 layers, dude. That was heavy. Well, we'll get into this. What's your favorite form of information? How it comes into you?
My favorite form, I think, has to be the moving image. It's the one I'm most comfortable with, I think.
Yeah.
Not only that, but I think it affords one the ability to be removed from the word, which I think can hinder the relating of information at times.
I like that. And by the word, you mean spoken word and or printed word?
I do, yeah. Language, textual language.
Right. Dude, you're anticipating all our questions. You have ESP?
I thought I did when I was a kid. I really did, actually. Whenever I'd had a dream, I'd wake up and I'd go, I need to write this down. Something might come from this.
Yeah, but you thought you did sort of implies that now you've realized you don't, or do you still think you do have ESP?
I don't think I do. I think I certainly convinced myself at times that I did, but I think it was, making castles in the sky.
That's what life's all about. So, why do you think humans collect or gather information?
I think humans gather information. I think the search for knowledge is just looking for meaning in an overall existence, I think, because um, actual existential truth is just impossible to grasp at. And I think people want to so badly. And I think the accumulation of information, trying to accumulate as much as one can, is, I think, many people's feeling that that's the best possible swipe they can have at trying to understand the machinations of existence, trying to make sense of it for themselves.
Yeah. Let me repeat what I felt you said there for a second. You It felt like you said that most people try to get as much information as possible because then they might get lucky and some of it will help them. So they sort of like self overload themselves and aren't as discerning as they could be.
Absolutely. Oh, I absolutely think that. I
Yeah.
think that we gather a lot of useless information, hoping that it'll have the answers. Because of course we don't know the answers. It is an unknown unknown. So you never know I guess you never know what information will maybe potentially hold an answer.
Yeah. No, we have a commonality in that we're both film programmers. And this film one year I showed said at the end, it said, ever wonder how much Rolodex space in your mind you waste just memorizing movie stars' names?
It's true.
It is true, man.
God, I mean, going to film school, which I wouldn't recommend to anyone, but going to film school, I met so many people who based so much of their existence as filmmakers learning as much as they could about other people's movies.
Yeah.
Only in terms of data. And I fell into that for so long, and I feel like I'm still working on kind of shaking that off.
Yeah. Well, especially because the genre we're both in, experimental film, it's not hard to memorize every experimental film's name because it's so small. and then someone turns you on a new one. You go, you didn't know that one? Wow.
Oh my god,
Oh
I'm
my
guilty of it myself. There have been
Okay,
countless times.
and I appreciate this, Nicholas, because I think you get what I'm after is you can take the time to think here. Just because I ask the question, you don't have to like rush into the answer. You're like taking a breath and gathering yourself. So is humans need or want to collect information, is it more innate in humans or more invented?
It's tough to say. I think it's invented, but it very well may be innate. I think it's invented just by nature of the societal structures that facilitate it. I think that it's not a natural state to be searching for information, to search for knowledge. But that's not to say that it's not what one is meant to do. It's hard to say, but I've never thought that the pursuit of knowledge itself was something natural per se.
Yeah.
It's a man-made invention.
Yeah, it's good. And, some of these questions at the beginning are, I say, is it more this or more that?
Hmm.
Both of us know it's both and it depends, but you're leaning saying, hey, it's a man-made invention. I understand that. I'm not holding you to that. But a couple interviews ago, the woman said, the word more doesn't function in that question. I thought that was classic. It was like, that's what I want. I want all my questions to be deconstructed in like, that's a stupid question. Or, any kind of comment because I'm trying to refine them. But it's funny when, okay, so the next one is, do thoughts create emotions?
Now, are you asking if thought is the root of all emotion?
Yeah, see, now you're answering a question with a question. You won. We're all over with you. That's it. Bingo. You hit a grand slam. Yeah. And again, that's a great question. As John Cage would say, I wouldn't want to ruin it with an answer, but I will. It's more like you put the questions into the context you want, but you can still suss out. I'm just saying, do
Mm,
thoughts create emotions? Now, again, this question's been psychoanalyzed recently a lot because people don't like the word create. They go,
mm.
well, there's another verb you should be using there. So I'm always open to any kind of, well, I'll answer it this way, or so I throw it out just as words, and then you can sort of put
Mm.
it together the way you want.
Then in that case, I do think that thought creates emotion. I think that one can see that in perfect display, in high relief in any form of art. Um, I mean, looking obviously my work. I'm a filmmaker and a programmer, so the moving image is my quickest reference to draw from. But I think that the arrangement and the presentation of thought is absolutely what creates, if not facilitates, emotion.
Yeah. Is thinking more innate or more invented?
Thinking, I do believe, is innate. I think it has evolved as man's become more of a uh, particularly a social creature, but I think that it stems from animal instinct. It's understanding your surroundings, even if it has changed from "Am I about to be eaten?" to "How does this painting make me feel?"
Yeah. It's good. Fill in the blank. I don't know what I think until I.
Gosh, for me, I think it's I don't know what I think until I say it.
Wow, that's heavy. I got the question from McLuhan. He says, I don't know what I think until I say it. Joan Didion says, I don't know what I think until I write it.
Hmm.
And then here's the one I love to throw out. Walter Benjamin loved to quote this in 35, his book, The Art of the Age of Mechanical Reproduction. It's by George Duhamel. I can no longer think what I want to think. My thoughts have been replaced by moving images.
Hmm.
So it's funny, your moving image like sort of world involves you thinking, saying, I don't know what I think until I say it. It's very interesting because I'm not holding it to you because I asked my mom if I could ask her all these questions once. She goes, yeah, but tomorrow I might answer them differently. Can humans think without language?
Oh, absolutely. In fact, I think humans think more clearly without language, and I think
Wow.
language uh, often obstructs the finest of thoughts and ideas. I think the limitations of language, for me, certainly have been a tremendous struggle, and I found that experimental filmmaking, in particular, f- afforded me an avenue for trying to express these ideas and these kind of forms in a way that is away from uh, or attempting to be away from language. Of course, the moving image has a language all its own.
Right. Yeah. You read my mind there again. But when you're saying language in that context, am I right? You're meaning, you call it textural language. You're meaning verbal language and not nonverbal language.
Mm,
You're meaning spoken word or printed word. Is
yes,
that yeah, that's
absolutely.
what you're meaning by language there. Yeah. So
Yeah.
Chomsky said the interesting thing. A language is not just words. It's culture, it's tradition, a unification of community, a whole history that creates what a community is. What do you do when language doesn't work? When language breaks down?
Hmm. I think when language breaks down, one must attempt to construct a language of their own through which they feel they can try to facilitate the relating of the ideas that are, I suppose, impossible to relate. And I feel like, particularly in my beginning to make films, that was exactly what I was doing as well, actually.
Yeah. Your observations of humans in general, are humans more thinking beings or more feeling beings?
I think they're more feeling beings on the whole, or well, there I am saying more again. I think they're feeling beings, and I think that the thinking uh, is often used to try and rationalize the feeling human, which I think is closer to maybe more of the natural state of being human or being at all.
Yeah. These are two questions from Alan Turing in 1950. Is thinking a function of the soul?
Yes, thinking is a function of the soul. And I think that thinking is how I suppose thinking is how one attempts to sort of transliterate the soul into a more comprehensible sense.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah. His second Turing question is, can machines think?
I don't think machines can think. I think that by nature of being constructed and guided by a human creator, it only serves as a sort of echo of its creator's thinking. So in that sense, I do not believe it can. No, a human is not, a machine rather, is not is not capable of thought or thinking.
Do you more pursue meaning or more pursue happiness?
I hope to pursue happiness, though I can say without a doubt that I pursue meaning hoping to find happiness.
Yeah. Does the brain more detect consciousness or create consciousness? Like, is consciousness there bubbling away and we're detecting it, or are we actually creating it?
Can you repeat the question for me?
Does the brain more detect consciousness or create it?
Hmm.
Like, is consciousness there, like bubbling away, and we're detecting it, or are we actually creating it?
Boy, I sure think we're creating it. I mean, I think we create it through uh, our structures and convention, and I think we project it on all that we encounter. But I do think it's a creation that has been uh, integrated in a sense to feel as if it is innate.
Yeah, it's good. What's faster, speed of light or speed of thought?
Speed of thought, absolutely. I think the speed of thought, particularly, um, I mean, uh, my mind is always racing a million miles an hour, and I'm always trying to, I have my notepads, and I'm always trying to jot it all down and all that. But it's always just too fast to get a hold of, isn't it? Any idea you get down is always some truly bastardized form of that idea. It's just a little too fast to ever get a hold of.
I like you showed your notepad. What year were you born?
I was born in 1996.
Are you a fluke of your peer group? I mean, do most people carry around pads your age? That's
You
like something
know,
we do.
no, not that I've seen too many people carry them around. Though I've noticed a small, maybe a smaller selection of people do. But I often find that they're of more of a similar mind to me, that of the person who has to have something on hand, or else it'll truly eternally be gone. And a
Yeah.
cell phone just can't do the job because it's, there's a finite quality to the notebook, whereas, one's notes app on their phone can be endless. And I've never been able to save an idea from my notes app on my phone. So I think by nature of that, I just have to have a physical thing to be able to get ideas down on if I ever want to be able to revisit them.
Yeah, but dude, a cell phone is a physical thing. It is but I know what you're
Phone
saying.
itself.
Yeah, I know what you're saying totally. I mean, I don't even have a cell phone. But here's the thing. You said absolutely speed of thought's faster than speed of light. Now, there's no right or wrong answers to any of these questions, but that one you got right. You can't dismantle the master's house using the master's tools. That's Audre Lorde. Yvonne Rayner responded, you can if you expose the tools. What new tool do you suggest?
By God, perhaps the notebook.
Ah, right. Talk about be here now. What do you worry about when you go to bed at night?
When I go to bed at night, what I'm worrying about more often than not, it's usually if everything's gonna be there when I wake up.
That's good.
The solipsistic mode, I suppose.
What's another word for Solacism? I never get that word, what it really means. What do you mean by that word?
Well, what I mean is the thought that that I am,
Right.
but that all else has the potentiality of being wholly fluid, that nothing is as definite as I think it to be, that they are only structures and constructs within my own consciousness. And this is not to say that, the table I'm sitting at isn't a table. There's not that there's nothing in front of me, but that my fundamental understanding of what this table is to be is not as it truly is.
Yeah.
And oftentimes, I think that, one can wake up and realize that what one thinks is not,
Yeah.
though maybe not the table.
Yeah. I agree with you. And I like that word fluid. McLuhan learned from Ezra Pound, the poet, that artists are the antenna of the race. They're broadcasting and detecting the hidden psychic effects of our inventions so that we can learn how to cope with what we don't like about them.
Mm.
So this was McLuhan's main probe is we can turn to the artists, filmmakers, authors, musicians to reveal these hidden psychic effects, but humans still ignore them. Why do humans ignore the hidden psychic effects of our inventions, even though we can turn to the artist to reveal them to us?
Hmm. I think there are two potential answers to this. I think the first being uh, that one perceives them in art and recognizes them as being a reflection. This reflection and this revealing of those qualities that we do not like, and feeling that they exist beyond them, that they are an island. And I think the second potential answer is that the viewer, the person perceiving it, the person interacting with it, finds that commiseration is enough, that they are comfortable in recognizing it themselves and feeling that being able to recognize it and to perceive it and to know it as it is uh, brings them enough satisfaction, and that they don't need to put in the work, the effort to transform it into something other than it is.
Yeah, it's good. In fact, again, you anticipate the next question. Wait a minute. That's not the next question, but I'm going to ask it anyways because it felt so perfect. James Joyce was the first projectionist in Dublin. Ran a movie theater called Volta Cinema. He basically checked out. He said, "This is stupid. Why should I go inside a building and see a movie of a tree when I can go outside and see a real tree?" Years later, Faulkner said, "Sometimes the best fiction is more true than journalism. Why do we have to recreate things in order to get them? Why do we have to go to a theatrical play of people acting out life? Why don't we just live life?"
I think that I think the answer to that is that going to see the film about the tree offers not an identical experience to the in person, the physical, tangible tree, but it offers an insight that approaching it in person does not. I think it offers um, not only an understanding of the tree itself, but of how others perceive it. I think it creates and immerses one in others, in the rest of humanity that consumes the image of the tree. So one can look at a tree by themselves. Sure, I do it all the time. But to see the film about the tree, I am not only seeing a tree, I am seeing how another sees a tree. And I think that offers not more than seeing a tree in person, but it offers something that seeing a tree in person cannot offer.
Are you very good? Thank you. Are you more afraid of old ideas or more afraid of new ideas? New ideas.
Hmm. I'm more afraid of old ideas, and the reason for that is that one can become awfully trapped in old ideas, whereas new ideas, there's a there's limitless potential in their newness, whereas an old idea, you can become confined in it, and your thinking can become bogged down in it, and you risk the horrible chance that you're saying something or thinking something that's been thought 1,000 times over. And I think for the individual, the thought of that is just catastrophic.
Yeah. I got that question. It sort of resonates. The guy who invented the intermittent windshield wiper, Charles Kettering, says people are very open-minded about new things, just as long as they're exactly like the old ones. Can you conjure up your earliest memory ever?
Hmm. I'm finding that I can't.
Yeah.
Though
Or
if
or just or just one early memory.
the
Some
earliest memory I can
yeah.
find is, let's see, I should have been keeping notebooks back then.
It's all
Gosh, the
right.
earliest memory I can think of, oddly enough, actually, gosh, wow. Um, my family used to be a member, like we remember this thing, and there's a pool. You go use a pool, right?
Yeah,
And this is certainly not, my earliest conscious memory. I was making memories well before that, but just I have a terrible memory as it is. And so I think this is just maybe the one that sticks out. But uh, a memory of plunging underwater, which I was absolutely terrified of because I can't swim hardly at all. I can doggy paddle, but that's really about pushing it. Of plunging underwater and thinking I'm about to come back up, but I'm still under the water. So I opened my eyes, and it was my first. Gosh, it's the first memory I have of, I guess, uh, seeing underwater, and I think I'm remembering it because it is a strange image, isn't it? You open
yeah,
your eyes in the pool, you're looking at people's legs and their billowing swim trunks.
yeah.
Gosh, that's funny.
Well, that was well described. Um, is memory more a curse or more a blessing?
I think it is a curse because we very quickly take it for granted, don't we? And as soon as it starts slipping away from us, because of course we assume it's concrete, and once it starts slipping away, it certainly reveals itself to be a curse because you get so used to having it, and it's so scary once it starts slipping away. And I've been thinking about that since forever because I've never been able to hold on to a thought in my head. So I'm immensely I'm immensely of the mind that memory is a curse in a sense.
Wow, that's heavy. You know, I mean, 90% people I ask, they go, well, it's a blessing. And then they'll go, well, it could be a curse, because everybody wants it to be the cliche thing that memory is a blessing. But I appreciate your honesty. Nicholas, tell me of someone within your immediate family who had an impact on you, just briefly, and what specifically was that impact, like a role model? And then it will be outside your immediate family.
Mm. Well, within my immediate family, I'd have to say my dad. And the reason for that is that I think that he kind of was my barometer for how to approach the world in what I perceived as the most sensical way. He's a very very logic forward kind of guy, and I feel like I always, more than anyone else in my family, immediate or otherwise, always felt most comfortable kind of tailing behind him because I always thought that he kind of had the most logical way of approaching things. But not only that, I think he um, really kind of got me thinking about most of the major ideas that I think about today, and not to say that he was, philosophizing to me, but being, essentially my primary role model. Everything that he encountered in his life, successes, failures, health troubles, and all that. Um, it was refracted through him, and I would draw a sort of understanding of the world at large through it.
Beautiful, well put. In outside your immediate family, someone who had an impact on you, and what was that impact?
Mm. I'd have to say Aldo Tambolini, who's a who was an artist for all seasons, who I met as a very young artist, and his moving image works were the first experimental film I ever encountered, and living a few miles away from me in Cambridge as I was growing up. I had access to him. I, reached out to him and he would respond to me. And he was really tremendously, tremendously formative in my thinking, all of my thinking, but particularly within art. And I think in every film I've made, in my programming decisions, in my thinking about art, and beyond, to politics, to philosophy, it's deeply tinged with the black ink of Aldo Tambolini.
Wow. What year how old were you when you first met him?
I want to say I was 17 when gosh, no, that can't be. I don't know. I was at right around becoming an adult, but I met him just because I was so interested in his work. But I was young because I saw his films when I was in high school on YouTube, because he wasn't one of those litigious filmmakers who, if a clip would appear online, he'd, go after whoever posted it with death on his breath. But so I was able to see his work in high school. So gosh, it was maybe 17, 18 years old.
That's amazing. So, did you stumble on his work on YouTube, or how did?
Yeah, I absolutely did.
Well, what are you searching for on YouTube? You just search experimental film, or did you search some topic and he showed up, or it just showed up out of the blue?
I think the way I found, of course, I have terrible memory, but so I might be this might be a revisionist history, but I think the way it happened was that, well, in high school, I loved movies. I'd watch movies with my dad, practically every day of the week. But I wasn't thinking of it. I wasn't really thinking of it as an art form for me to work in by any measure. Uh, but primarily because I only thought of narrative film, because I hadn't encountered any experimental film. So I was a painter, and that was what I kind of had envisioned myself pursuing. But I was interested in the avant-garde. That was always something that really was enticing to me. That it presented new light, in a sense, new visions, and so I'd kind of try and dredge through the internet to find these kind of new ideas
Right.
to awaken me, because of course, growing up in the internet age, I was on the computer when I was like 8 years old. I was getting in trouble for watching stuff, and I didn't know what I was watching. I think, God, I mean, you can a kid with a computer that doesn't have any, like, restrictions on it, you can get into a lot of trouble. And, a lot of the kids I was friends with, when I was that age, they might accidentally stumble upon, like, something horrible, like beheading videos or something. But me, I was stumbling upon, like, avant-garde art. That, I mean, I stumbled upon that other stuff too. But I was, I just was stumbling upon films on the internet, and
Yeah.
so I always thought of the computer as a dear friend and resource. So I think I came upon his work most likely through uh, my time-honored friend of UbuWeb.
I
Uh,
I I read your mind there. I was keep wanting to say, did you go to Ubu Web? I mean,
I
Ubu Web
think
is
I did.
dude. Ubu Web is so amazing for any kid in the experimental avant-garde world. It's
It
just like
was unbelievable.
that is unbelievable.
And but I was seeing all these artists' names, and,
Yeah.
not always are there full films available, but so I'd see names, and I'd read the biographies, I'd read the texts and stuff there, and then I'd go looking for it, and Aldo's work was readily available on YouTube. I mean, his whole Black film series has been publicly available on YouTube for, I wanna say, like, God, like 10 years or something.
Cool.
So I stumbled upon it before I'd seen any other experimental film. I hadn't seen a Brackage, I hadn't seen anything. Aldo's stuff was the first I'd seen. And being, a kid who was interested in painting, particularly abstract expressionism, it blew my mind, because I thought the images I'm seeing that I love in painting, this guy, he has them in motion, you know?
Yeah.
So I was, I was bewitched immediately. And he had the absolute grace to not only, respond to me, be like, "Hey, thanks for liking my movies," but to talk to me. And I was able to visit him a couple times and record some conversations. And he was a profound impact on me. And actually now here I am helping plan, memorial events for him.
Yeah. Beautiful. Well, it's beautiful description of an important friend. So we're going to get back and film just a couple more
Absolutely.
philosophical. Were you raised a particular religion?
Um, I was raised vaguely Christian, and uh, my father is of the Episcopalian denomination, though. I've set foot in a church, fair weather style, weddings and funerals, but a lot of it was spent kind of masquerading as a Catholic for my Spanish grandmother. And that's kind of the closest I ever really got. But I wasn't really raised religious at all, really. Um, yeah, I kind of grew up sans religion. And I really didn't have any understanding of uh, any religion at all, really, until honestly, to like college when I was like, well, let's take a few world religions classes and figure out what the hubbub's about.
Do you pray?
I do. It's I thought I prayed when I was a kid, when I was younger, but that was really just thinking very hard on further reflection. But I do now intermittently. Um, and though I'm not really of any denomination or particular religious group, I do, because I've always been spiritual in that sense. I've always been interested. I mean, I've always been tremendously interested in particularly the occult. But I'm not praying to Baphomet or anything like that. But I do, because I think there is a universal kind of life energy, and I feel that you know maybe you don't get out what you put in, but it certainly can't help if it is in fact just reflection and thinking awfully hard about things you wish for or want or guidance. It can't hurt you.
Good words. Nicholas, if God does exist, what would you like God to say to you after you die?
Wow.
That is a good response. I've never had that response. Do evil people exist, or does evil use people as a vehicle?
I think it's people who can be evil, because I don't believe in this sort of general sense of evil, particularly because of how um, fluid morality is. But it's an individual, certainly. It's because I think when one lends a sort of overall kind of a presence to evil as a whole, I think it takes away from um, the actions of people. Uh, there are evil people. There aren't. No, there. No. Let me rephrase that. There are not evil people, but there are people who do evil, and yes, one is not wholly evil through and through, but there are selfish people. There are people who are driven not by goals of hoping to do right by the people around them, hoping to give back or contribute or to generate, They hope to, and it's not they hope to destroy. Of course, there are some people who do, some wackos, but it's selfishness. So I think it's an individual thing. Those who are self-possessed and driven only by their own desires or that which benefits them or their stakeholders.
How do you advise someone to deal with an enemy? This one I'm going to set up with a few modern thinkers' thoughts. Alan Watts says, if you acknowledge your enemy, you empower them. Coppola stole from the mob and the samurais. Keep your friends close and your enemies closer. JFK says, forgive your enemy, but don't forget their name. And Fellini says, I need an enemy. A lot of thoughts. The basic question is, how do you advise someone to deal with an enemy? But first, how would you respond to Alan Watts? If you acknowledge your enemy, you empower them.
I mean, I'd agree with Watts. I'd say that by acknowledging your enemy, you are admitting that the effect they have on you has such a profundity that you recognize them as your enemy, which, to recognize another person or presence as an enemy, I think requires a great deal of thinking about it. And not only that, but anger and hatred. And it necessitates a great deal of emotional involvement. And how can that not but embolden someone who wishes you ill?
Yeah.
Absolutely. I don't know what to do with an enemy. I've had a few, and it's just really torn me up. I never know what to do with an enemy. Um, I mean, my answer has always been, make a little movie about it. That'll show them.
You really, I mean, that's the history of art. That is amazing. Well, that's almost indigenous American Indians say your enemy's your best teacher. So, anyways, that was really honest. And I appreciate that. You don't realize how many people have not, most people say, I know what to do, and they give me some, wise words. But to say, I don't know is so real and honest. I don't know what to do with that. I mean, is totally valid. See, that's the problem with the interviews format is that I ask a question, then you're expected to say, here's my answer. But I always try to make people feel like saying, I don't know is a totally valid answer, that it's just as valid as if you go, well, you do this or that, you know. And so that I really appreciate that. So you've sort of explained your sort of pursuits career path by you implied that you first pursued painting and then you went into filmmaking. So can you walk me through that first? Like what first attracted you to pursue painting? Like were your parents taking you to art museums, or somehow you got some sort of attraction to painting? And then what first attracted you to actually making films? Your dad's taking you to movies, and then when did you go, oh, I can do that?
That's a good question. I was thinking about this not too long ago. I started, I hate to name drop, but I was pursuing the other year, potentially going to pursue an MFA in filmmaking, which ultimately I decided not to do. But I was interviewing with Cal Arts, and James Benning was talking to me, and he asked me, "What is the first? When was the first time you ever made a piece of art?" And though on paper that first piece of art would be painting, um, I realized, just because I was thinking particularly in the moving image format, that it was actually derived from watching movies with my father, and I'll get into that. Um, But approaching painting came from, my parents, my dad did take us to museums and stuff as kids, but, it was typically, the Museum of Fine Art in Boston. I grew up in Boston, so it was the Museum of Fine Art in Boston, occasionally the ICA if he was feeling wild. Um, so, I mean, it wasn't that I was exposed to art, but I wasn't thinking about art at all, and I never really was. I wasn't thinking of film as art particularly. It was just something that was on because, my dad would throw on AMC and we'd watch, Hamburger Hill. But, I was just thinking of that as, the noise in the background really. And just perhaps that's just, the nature of kind of growing up in this omnipresent media era. But, I was a very, though my parents would never say it because, I've always been kind of a people pleaser, but I've always been a very shy, reserved person. I've never felt that I was very good at socializing in a sincere way. And I found that I had tremendous difficulty with particularly communicating with others, particularly in a way that was honest. I could talk to people, but relating my thoughts and ideas always felt unreachable. And being in, growing up, progressing through school, there were I was meeting kids who liked to paint, to photography, sculpture, and all that. And I guess just by nature of being around those kids, I began to think about that making art was actually a mode of expressing oneself. And not only in that you can render a form in whatever medium you choose to, but that you can relate the ideas in your head in a non-verbal method. And so I thought that doing so might be, I wasn't thinking I'll be an artist. I was thinking maybe I'll be able to figure out what it is I'm trying to say. Um, and so having the materials available, I started painting because it felt like I'd have the most ease in relating ideas because, it's my hand, the brush, the canvas, it's there, it's all there. It's kind of a self contained thing in a way. Um, but I never wanted, and by nature of trying to express an idea, I felt that painting, a person or a scene, a field, some flowers wouldn't really be able to do that. So I thought that taking the approach of the stuff I'd seen at the Institute of Contemporary Art might be more appropriate. The kind of more dramatic, um, dynamic forms that I was seeing in these abstract expressionist paintings. So I kind of started approaching it in that mode, and I started trying to paint pictures of myself through that lens of thinking of uh, uh, dramatizing in a sense the figurative image. But I very quickly realized you got to be good at painting before you start experimenting with painting. And I've got about the clumsiest hands anyone could be given. I mean, I've got the nicks, the cuts. I've got a second degree burn from the oven. I just can't. I couldn't. I was not a very good painter, and I felt that it was too crude to be able to express any idea I had, let alone paint an actual picture of myself. Um, so I only found painting to be a frustrating, more frustrating than relieving. I mean, I'd be in my garage, getting high off of oil paint fumes, and I just walk out more tense than I did when I walked in. Um, but I was interested in the forms. I was interested in particularly the materiality of paint on canvas because I was really interested in the abstract expressionists. So sometimes these canvases would be so layered thick with paint, and that really, excited me. And so when I came upon the work of Aldo Tambolini, who was the first experimental filmmaker I'd seen, that really that activated me in a sense that there was a way to render them render these ideas in these forms differently. And but looking back, I think it makes perfect sense, perfect logic that film would be the place to go, because I was watching these films all the time as a kid. I mean, kids collect stuff, right? Well, I was collecting DVDs before I was even thinking of them as art or anything. I was just thinking, I want to have these pictures going on while I'm sitting wringing my hands about stuff. And I was, to bring it back to why I referenced Jim Spenning asking me the question of what is the first piece art making you'd ever done. I realized that while I wasn't thinking of it as art, maybe it was, which was watching all these films, and I referenced Hamburger Hill, the American Vietnam War film. Um, I saw it on AMC with my father on some Friday evening or something, when he came home from work, and I thought, gosh, this is crazy. The images were, it wasn't really my kind of movie. As a kid, I was a little shell shocked by it.
Yeah.
But I was a kid, and sometime later, I was like being dragged through the mall or something. And I'd always stop into whatever place was selling DVDs. And I came upon Hamburger Hill, and I thought, oh man, it's on sale for $2.99. What a steal. So I got it anyway, even though I didn't really like it. And I didn't have a DVD player at the time. There's one in the living room, but my parents certainly didn't want me, skipping around the DVD for Hamburger Hill all day when they're trying to watch, the news. So I stuck it into the computer, the home computer, and I found that I could very easily. I mean, I guess this was before people were thinking about piracy too hard. I could so easily just take the film file and put it onto my desktop. And I don't know, I was excited by that idea, so I threw it onto I started editing the movie. Started re-editing the
Wow.
movie, and what I was doing was I wasn't like, I'm going to make this a better movie. I thought, I don't know what I thought, but what I was doing was I was playing with it,
Yeah.
and what I was doing was I was re-editing it in different ways. I was First, though, what I was doing was I was separating up all the scenes. I was rearranging them. I would find like a common image. I'd find every instance of that image and line them up. And it was just a thing to do that felt very satisfying. And I don't know, it ended with me clogging the whole computer hard drive with different versions that I had edited of Hamburger Hill, you know, Hamburger Hill, but only explosions, Hamburger Hill, no explosions, um, Hamburger Hill, without any people in it. And looking back, I think that that was maybe not so consciously, but um, that was my first foray into film. And lo and behold, now I'm an experimental filmmaker with a distinct found footage bent.
Yeah.
And I think, looking back, that has a great deal of responsibility for that. But getting into the moving image itself and being a filmmaker, that came from Aldo Tambellini. And then once I decided I was going to pursue film, I was like, well, I must go to film school, which ultimately I regret in some ways, but in others, I met, everyone who would be of profound influence to me and introduced me to the other experimental filmmakers that are
Yeah.
pivotal to my thinking. So that's how I got
No,
into art
that
making.
was well put, and I really love your path, realizing that the raw footage. I years ago I started this fake experimental film school called the School of Found Footage, and it was like Bruce Conner, Dustin Makabayev, and somebody else were going to be my main professors. And it was the theme was all the films in the world have already been made. It's just a question of re-editing them. And I mean, this is a huge genre, and it's fun because you were part of my film school, or that philosophy without going, I'm going to do this. Because then you could go find Bruce Conner or Craig Baldwin or Dustin Makabayev and see these guys just use footage. In fact, my cousin, when he sees a found footage film, he goes, "That's cheating. You didn't shoot your own footage." I goes, "Are you kidding? That's not cheating." So a screenwriting teacher told me a great film or great art is when you can clearly see the intention of the maker. Kubrick says the opposite. Great art or great film is when you can clearly not see the intention of the maker. What role does intention play in your creative process?
Well, I've always thought I approached my creative process with having a very clearly defined idea for what I wanted it to be. I'd always write out these um, aesthetic approaches, these intellectual approaches, formal approaches. And, I would say, well, I'm going to follow this and it's going to be very rigorous and it's going to pursue this idea. But I found that intuition would always get in the way of it. And I'd find that once I started working, I'd be far more guided by the ideas the images were presenting once brought together in wholly new directions. So, I think intention would always be the key, but I think it's invariably turned into intention being a launching pad for ideas that I had not considered before the film began, in effect, generating itself. And then I'm more of a guiding force upon it rather than the pure sculptor of it. But I've always thought that intention is, I mean, I think it's I think that one can lend as many claims of intentionality to any form of art as they want, but if it's not clearly defined to the person viewing it, it effectively does little, unless you want to, hand the viewer a big artist statement, which I'm really kind of explicitly against, because I think that the individualized experience of perceiving a work of art is far more generative than that of one where the ideas are explicitly handed to the person viewing it. So I've kind of it's taken a lot of work, but embracing that, um, I think has been pivotal to maturing as an artist for me.
Very good. And Duchamp said there's no art without an audience. How much are you thinking of your audience when you're making your film?
I'm really not at all. Um, I there I I think of an audience only in the sense of um, if what I'm presenting is passe or not, really. I mean, if I'm presenting tired ideas. So in that sense, I'm thinking of the audience. I'm thinking, what am I offering that's new? What am I offering of myself that someone else isn't offering? Because I don't want to make something that in effect has been made. Uh, if that was the case, what would be the point of making art? Um, but I also don't worry too much about how the forms and the ideas are going to be perceived, insofar that I'm creating something that has a clear meaning to me, but should it relate something otherwise to an audience member, or if it's viewed by anyone at all, really, I do think is secondary, because I am at the heart of it making films for myself, attempting to express something, not to an audience, but really to myself, to try to make clearer the ideas that I cannot with my own words. So I don't worry too profoundly about audience in that sense, though I will try to avoid uh, uh, excessively provocative imagery by that right, because I do think it can often obfuscate any exciting ideas by way of, you know, the extravagance or the sensationalism of those images.
Welcome to Hollywood, dude. That's spectacles number one in the 7 key elements of storytelling. Or McLuhan says everything we invent extends some humanness, like clothing extends our skin, knife and fork extends our teeth. The shutter in a projector or a camera is extending our eyelid. What does a film extend for you? What humanness does it extend?
I think it extends perception. I think it
Yeah.
extends the way the artist perceives the world, not in a figurative sense per se, but in what the images they're perceiving and the sensory reception is relating and creating within the maker of it. Um, and I think that maybe, that can be said for any art form, but I think particularly um, it visualizes worldview.
Yeah. I like that word perception. Is perception reality?
No, 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 no. I think perception. In fact, I think perception can be as far from reality as one could be at times. It's so it's so malleable and plastic and able to be manipulated by any many forces that I think it's impossible to say that perception is a direct reflection of reality by any measure.
Peter Greenway says cinema is much too rich a medium to be left to storytellers. Are are experimental filmmakers telling a story a different way or doing something completely different? In other words, me and you could watch Tony Conrad's The Flicker and stories could go through our heads, but in essence, it's not storytelling per se. What's your take on that, Greenaway? Cinema is much too rich a medium to be left to storytellers.
I think, I absolutely agree with Greenaway, whose work I really adore. I think that the experimental filmmaker, while they can be approaching relating a narrative in maybe some alternative way, I think what it does best is use cinema or the moving image as a mode for relating, um, not story, something, but the abstract. I think it's best at relating what I'd call energy. I think it relates something that story cannot. I think the storytelling can elicit and construct feelings and responses, but I think that, when left to the experimental filmmaker, it can access the emotions a narrative, a storyteller hopes to create through a different avenue, a different it elicits emotional responses and intellectual responses through uh, the novel approach of relating energy through rhythm and light.
George Manupelli started the Ann Arbor Film Festival 60 years ago. Me and you are sitting with him. We time travel. Do we want this festival to be more inclusive or more exclusive? I asked Chick Strand. She said they were starting Canyon Cinema the same time with Bruce Bailey. They wanted to recreate their 11-cent movie going experience. They wanted to see a cartoon, a newsreel, and then a film. Brackett says, don't show that other stuff, just show experimental films. Would you lean towards being more inclusive or more exclusive?
It's counterintuitive to say, but I would absolutely lean towards being more exclusive by right of everything. Moving image removed from experimental film is so accessible through many other venues, and I think that it can detract. I think it. I mean, in effect, I think it can turn the experimental film into a sort of sideshow attraction of a curiosity, and now our experimental section, a trip to the freak show. And I think it when presented with, narrative work, animation, I think it kind of shapes experimental film as being a sort of novel diversion or some aberration from what is cinema or the moving image, instead of it being really its own mode entirely. I think it detracts from that.
This goes right along with it. What are the services and disservices of marginalizing experimental film? Jackson Pollock was on the cover of Life magazine in 49. Regular folks could establish and develop an aesthetic on experimental painting. There were no Bruce Conner or Maya Derens on Life magazine covers. Generally, it's privileged, I call them rich art kids, who develop an avant-garde aesthetic and dominate the experimental film world. Any comment?
Well, first I'd say that I think I am very guilty of being one of those film school kids, but I think that it's tricky because while we want, while one would, well, I can't speak to anyone else. What I would hope to do is keep the um, the idea of experimental film being its own mode intact. It is tremendously unapproachable by right of being so far removed from the moving image, the visual media that people are used to consuming. Uh, it's a difficult venue to make more accessible without denigrating it in a way, without watering it down, because experimental film is at its heart sort of an intellectual approach, or a philosophical approach to image making. It's approaching it with a different set of eyes, and by doing that, it's alienating by nature of what it is. So it's difficult, because how can one attract other people, or introduce other people to something that's so difficult to introduce people to? It requires a lot of legwork to get most anybody into experimental film, for many many reasons, but particularly accessibility.
Yeah, I talked with just a couple days ago, Alex McKenzie. I don't know if you know about him. He had Blinding Light in Vancouver, was like the only full-time, all experimental film, all the time venue, you know, like every night, and quite amazing. And we talked about Koyaanisqatsi because when we saw Koyaanisqatsi in the movie theaters, and having gone to the Ann Arbor Film Festival for many years, we went, we've seen this for years, but this guy got it in a popcorn theater. How'd that happen? You know, and then it reminded me of Phil Solomon told me, he says, I'm a professional experimental filmmaker. It's like, yeah, right. You teach, and, Sundance gives you a couple bucks, or some art museum gives you a couple bucks. So you feel like, you can't make your living being an experimental filmmaker. But then Reggio took his footage from Koyaanisqatsi and sold it to like American Express TV commercials as stock footage. So it's like, was he a sellout, or was he just being smart experimental filmmaker? Like, no, I don't have to teach to survive. So, it's sort of like the two things I love to quote are great editor of Punk magazine Flipside. He goes, don't sell out, sneak in. And then Paul Schrader said, the role of the artist is to attempt to sell out but fail. So Michael Apted, I spoke with him, a really great filmmaker, 28 and up, and coal miner's daughter. And he made a documentary on a Russian rock star 40 years ago. And I said, why do rock video makers feel so obliged to edit fast? Most people don't know, Abel Gance pretty much invented rapid montage in 1922, but it flourished in the 80s with MTV. And even Marty Scorsese says, I cut my films faster because of MTV. He said, why do these rock video makers feel so obliged to edit fast? He says, because we've learned to take in information faster. So I asked this question with a bias. Can humans literally learn to take in information faster, or are we just brainwashed to believe we can?
I don't think we can learn to take in information faster, but I think we can develop new ways of thinking about the information we're receiving. And I think we can refine how we work with that. But no, I don't think so. It's
Is it literally possible to multitask?
If it is, I haven't figured it out.
Nicholas, what was the motive of the cave artist? Not what Herzog said or anthropologists, just your hunch.
I suppose the intention of the cave artist was to relate the world for others to know. And when I think of the cave artist, I think of course, depictions of the animals one would hunt, the handprints of the people painting on the walls or those who are around them. It's documentation in a way, but with the express purpose, I think, of documenting it for posterity, for future generations to be able to glean something from, even if it's not clear what's to be gleaned from. There's record of it, and it'll help you in some way.
Back to George Manupelli said that his mantra was ignore yourself. Jonas Mekas says there is no self-expression, and Cecil Taylor, the great jazz pianist, says I'm just a vehicle and this just comes through me. Is art making more self-expression or more your vehicle for whatever culture or technology is dominant? I know it's both and it depends, but just your hunch.
I think art making is a reflection of, more than anything, the self that is filtered through the societal, the cultural, the contextual. I think it is inherently a it is self-expression at perhaps the face level of it, but I think it serves the greater purpose of offering more perspectives on the large scale, on the powers that be, the energy that courses through the universe. I think self-expression can be attempted, but I think it is limited, what one can do with it without it being not muddied, not marred, but turn into a reflection that is beyond the artist and speaks to more than the artist's intention.
Can art making be egoless?
I think by right of sitting down to make a piece of art, it demands the involvement of ego. I don't think it can possibly. I've never met an egoless artist. And I think it's inherent to art. There's no art without the artist, and the artist, particularly if they're thinking of themselves as an artist, is ripe with it. And even if they're not, it's still a reflection of one's own ego. So no, I think it's impossible to have art without ego.
What's more important, conviction or compromise?
Conviction. I think that if one is without conviction, how can one offer anything really? Because you can compromise yourself into nothingness, and God knows I've come close to it. But no, I think conviction, even if it is a compromised conviction, a necessary compromising of conviction, to retain one's convictions to the best of one's ability, is of the utmost importance, particularly in art and in the artist.
Moshe Feldenkrais works with healing and movement. He says it's literally possible to identify a weakness and incorporate it to become a strength, rather than we're normally taught to overcome a weakness. Tell me a weakness you've turned into a strength.
Well, I suppose, though, I don't really recognize any of them as strengths, but perhaps I could attribute the weakness I've had with my ability to communicate has since been transformed in a sense as being a strength in my filmmaking, in that I put a great amount of energy in attempting to relate meaning non-verbally, and I think that's become a strength within my filmmaking, but not anywhere else.
Tell me thank you, that was good. One major element of your creative process, your output, that's changed since you started, and one major element that stayed the same.
I think the most major element, I'll start with what stayed the same. I think the most major element that stayed the same has been my working with found images. That has always felt integral to my filmmaking process, my image making process, by nature of recognizing that pre-existing images can carry meaning that images that I create can't possibly touch, by nature of them being in existence and being repurposed. So that has not changed. Though I would say what has changed is my thinking about repurposed images. So it's kind of the same thing. And the reason for that is that, the more I've worked with found imagery, the more potential I've seen in it. Because at first I thought, when I first was working with found images, I thought this gives me access to images that I could not possibly render myself. But now I feel that I've come to a place to recognize that found images offer a new type of energy that renders something entirely different in a film. And I think the reason for that change has been acknowledging that the literal image, the figurative image, is is more than itself. It can exist beyond the figurative image that you see on the screen. And a good reference for this would be Joseph Conrad's By Night with Torch and Spear. It's existent footage of these factories, these foundries, but by taking these images and transforming them only slightly, flipping them, it gives access to effectively new worlds, and approaching that I can access new worlds in a sense, and not just find imagery that I'm not able to create myself, has been profound. To be able to approach found imagery not in the literal sense, but of the energistic sense, or the even spiritual energy that it can bring with it, and the potential it can hold beyond its physical form.
Really well put. And there's a saying that goes, "You create what you resist." Bob Goldthwait, the comedian, morphed it into "You are what you hate." James Joyce said, "It's a curious thing how your mind is super saturated with the religion in which you say you disbelieve." Buñuel nailed it. "Thank God I'm an atheist." So this whole idea, what you resist persists, or just your general thoughts on this, you create what you resist. Not so much you, but one creates what one resists. Any thoughts?
One does create what one resists, but it is, of course, a reflection of what they resist that is almost tinged with the blood of he who resists it. So it's interesting. You create it, but you create it in a new form, and in that sense, you change it. So it's not creating what you resist, but it is recreating, almost in one's own image, what you resist.
It's good. Never had that answered that way. Reminds me of no, that was good, because I think, Frank Zappa's much like Louis Buñuel. They couldn't done their thing without being raised Catholic. It's so much a part of them. But they, like, my one friend says, Zappa reverently satirizes what he loves. And you can reverently satirize what you hate too. And it's like you this tinged with the blood. That was great. I like that. It's like this guy, this poet, I says, "What does the writing utensil extend for you? What does poetry extend?" Like you said, you answered, "What does film extend? What humanness?" And he goes, "Tears." And it's like blood. Like Herzog's told us, you've got to bleed for cinema. It's like, yeah. So I asked for 90 minutes. It's almost up, but can you go into extra 5 or 10 minutes?
Yeah,
Okay,
of course.
cool. If you were walking down the street today and you met yourself as a 12-year-old, what would you say to your 12-year-old self?
Oh God. Well, there's plenty I'd say. I don't think I'd listen, but I'd say, please, please, please try to care less about what other people think about you,
Yeah.
because that has only served to hinder my own self-development. Absolutely. I mean, me as a kid, I was so hung up on everything everyone thought about me, and it made me crazy. My God, I was fried by 15 years old. I was such an anxious kid. But I don't think I would have been, by nature of that, I don't think I would have been able to reach me, but I'd sure try.
How do you find peace of mind?
I feel like I find peace of mind in attempting to recognize, and I say attempting because it doesn't always work, but attempting to recognize that which puts strain upon me is more often than not only abstract. It is, these things that one worries about, or at least what I worry about, is more often than not, it's recognizing that it can't truly bring me harm. It cannot, that which I worry about cannot kill me. It cannot destroy me in any way. It is only a presence that I allow to trouble myself. So it's recognizing what is tangible and what is a construct that I am letting weigh me down.
It's really good. That's what we call it. Turn a breakdown into a breakthrough. Turn a rejection into a redirection. And it's back to Moshe Feldenkrais. Turn a weakness into a strength. You can actually flip these and not, Can you forget to die?
Forget to die. I think you can. I think that one can forget to die through their particularly the artist. I think one can very well forget to die, and even when their physical body is gone, it's almost as if their consciousness still reverberates eternally. I mean, I feel that, I spoke of my friend Aldo Tambolini. I think that though his physical body is gone, his thoughts, his ideas, his presence is still echoing loudly.
Yeah.
So I think so.
Very good. If a publisher was to release your autobiography off the top of your head, what would the title be?
Autobiography. Boy, who would read that? What would it be called? I think it'd have to be called The Thinking Man's Idiot.
Oh, nice. They want to scent the glue in the binding. What smell?
Flop sweat.
FLOP?
FLOP.
That's human sweat? What is flop sweat?
The fear of failure, the shakes.
But it's not, you mean it's but human body created sweat.
Absolutely.
Flop sweat. That is good. That could be a punk rock band too.
my God, I feel like every major event of my life has been accented with the fine aroma of me nervously sweating about how it's going to all come crumbling down on my head.
Tell me something good you never had and you never want.
Something good I've never had and never want. It's intangible, but what I've never had and never want is satisfaction with the work I'm doing.
Wow, it's good. You never had it and you never want it. That is a great answer. I've never gotten that answer. That's like self-satisfaction with your work. That's good. Then you're fucked as soon as you go, oh, I did great. Then you're like,
once you go, I've done it. It's over.
Yeah. That's why your film festival has no awards.
No awards, non-competitive. Peripheries is, I call it a festival because I think of it as that, but it's there's no awards. It's a showcase really, because
it's good to call it a film festival in the genre. I mean, George Manupelli started, it's pretty amazing. Cinema's only 130 years old, approximately. The festival's 60 years old. It's half the age of the medium. And he started with this philosophy. We don't, all he wanted was beer money. Like, he didn't want to make entry fees or whatever. He just wanted a couple bucks to buy beers while he was running the whole thing. And then somebody came to him and said, "Oh, so and so died, and we want to have an award in their honor." And he went, "Oh shit!" And he knew from that point the awards thing is fucked. I mean, it's change, and we cope with it and we deal with it. But yeah. So, if you were in a vat of vomit up to your neck and someone threw a bag of shit at your face, what would you do?
Wow. Well, I guess I'd look back on all the times I felt it's metaphorically happened to me and try to draw some guidance from it.
Oh my God. Nicholas, you are truly a brilliant human. The guy who taught me that is amazing because he basically said that question's like a metaphor for life. And you really gave an enlightened answer. I like that. Just a couple more.
Yeah.
Joseph Boyce said, "Make the secrets productive." Lou Welsh said, "Guard the secrets, constantly reveal them." But it was Thornton Wilder in 1928. He said, "Art is confession. Art is the secret told. But art is not only the desire to tell one's secret, it's the desire to tell it and hide it at the same time." Yeah, it's a wow sort of statement. You've laid your cards on the table for 90 minutes. I'm not insinuating you haven't answered this. What's it really all about for you?
What's it really all about? I think it's really just all about making sense of it and trying to find a way that makes sense of it. Because, as sure-footed as I may feel, I'm never going to be certain of it. So I think it's just trying to find, with some hope toward exactitude, what it's all about.
Yeah.
But assuming I'm not going to find shit.
Yeah. Back to that vat of vomit and that bag of shit.
Maybe I'll find that shit.
Okay, you've done so well. You got a bonus. This is 5 Alan Watts questions, just really quick off the top of your head in a few words.
All right.
Who started it all?
Who started it all? God.
Are we going to make it?
No.
Where do we put it?
Whoever we can find a place for it.
Who's cleaning it up?
More often than not, you're going to have to.
Is it serious?
It feels that way, but when you get down to brass tacks, no way. Can't be.
Wow. Great answer. Just a couple more. What's the healthiest cultural shift you see developing today?
I think the healthiest shift I'm seeing is approaching or attempting to approach transparency. I think it's more likely than not a losing battle, but I think it seems that people are trying to, or feeling compelled to, uh, uh, reveal their secrets, to not keep so much hidden. And I think it can only be a good thing unless it really takes a turn that I'm not expecting.
Yeah, it's like back to that word, lay your cards on the table. Yeah, it reminds me of another Buñuel quote. "I'm for anyone who seeks the truth, but I part ways when they claim they found it."
Mm.
But But for some reason, we're going to keep seeking the truth. But, you know, if you find it, wow, I'm a little hesitant about that. Okay, last question. Nicholas, has been truly enlightening and fun. That's what I like about these, to have fun. What gives you the most optimism?
What gives me, oh, I know the answer to this one. What gives me the most optimism is that no matter how many times I think I've hit, I've run out of it, whatever it is, whenever I feel like it's all been used up, it's all been seen, it's all been found. I feel like I've got it figured out. It never is. There's always something new, and there always will be something new.
Yeah, it's good. It's the name of your film festival is sort of like that. It reminds me of this term I learned from studying James Joyce and McLuhan, is center without margin. Peripheral. You know, it's like, yeah, we think there's a center here, but it just keeps going. Or it's the snake eating its tail, you know. It's like, Wyndham Lewis said, the artists live in the present. You know, we're trying to live in the, like, we've done good. We've lived in this live TV show for the last hour and a half. This is live TV. Can you believe that? He says, the artists live in the present and write a detailed history of the future. If you believe that, I got some swampland just off the coast. I'll sell you cheap. Been an honor and a pleasure, Nicholas. Thank you so much.
Thank you. This has been an absolute pleasure.
Really fun. Bye.
Thanks for having me. Bye.
Yes.